Hey y'all, it's Christy Cook from Teadoddles. Um, and today I'm going to talk to y'all about zippers. Um, Zippers are something that some people are afraid of. They don't, when it comes to sewing, some people will avoid putting in zippers at all costs. Um, and I think that it's just a matter of knowing some techniques to make it a little bit easier, using the correct equipment, so to speak, and practice, right? Most anything in life that you want to learn how to do, it takes some practice. Rarely are we ever excellent at something the first time we try it. I will say zippers for the longest time were a pain to me, and I did avoid them, and mostly in clothing because it's a little bit different to put a zipper in clothing than it is in a bag. But today I'm going to show you how to put a zipper in a zippy pouch bag when I'm making for the shop. Um, and that should help out with some zipper problems. Now, putting a zipper in a garment is a little different because you put it into a seam, but I will do that in a different tutorial. Today we're talking about zippers in bags. So, first things that you would do, let's see. Should have got my ruler out. I've got my front and back to my pouch and my front and back to the inside of my pouch. And I'm just going to put a ruler on this and hopefully y'all can see that. Let's see. Move some things out the way. Yeah. If we put a measurement on this pouch, it is 10.5 inches wide, okay? Zipper I'm using is an 8-inch zipper, and 8 inches is from the zipper stop, the metal zipper stop, to where there's this metal end. It does not include these little pieces here, okay? That's just some extra to help you sew it into something. It is not the measurement of the zipper. The zipper measurement includes the zipper portion itself, okay? So, I have, like I said, 10.5 inch wide, 8-inch zipper. And if I put this up here, we can see you have some left over, which you do want to have some left over because whatever your seam allowance is on each side, out of the frame, whatever your seam allowance is on the outside, you want to kind of mark that up here to be sure you're clearing the seam allowance. I know some people will taper this up to sew in the edge of the zipper, and I have done that before. I'm going to show you how to use some double fold bias tape to finish that end and keep your sides straight so you don't have to sew into the end of the zipper. So what I would do is mark, I use on these bags about a 1/2 inch seam, okay? So get me a marking tool. I'm going to take this off the back first. Make that a little bit easier. And actually, I have this one out, but I'm going to use my front pieces first, okay? Front piece first. So I just find that easier to put the zipper on that piece first. So just lay out your zipper. And if you want to find I like to eyeball things, but you can certainly mark the center of your zipper and the center of your bag so you can better make sure that it's centered. I don't do that because I've been doing this for a while and I'm pretty good at eyeballing. So if I look at the end, and then we'll move this out of the way, I'm going to mark up here at the top this about a 1/2 inch. Okay. I'm going to mark at the other end a 1/2 inch. y'all can see that or not, but I have my 1/2 inch marked at each end because that is about the seam that I use. It's a little bit less than 1/2 inch because I use the edge of my presser foot as a guide for this, and it's about 3/8, so it's close to 1/2 inch though. So I always mark 1/2 inch, it's just easier. So if I put this up here, I can see, I don't know if y'all can see that, but my little tail end is right at the edge of those marks, which is fine, but I want to use this, okay? And all this is, you can buy double fold binding in the store, but I made my own to coordinate with my bag, and it's just a piece of fabric. I usually I measure this just to be sure over here. Yeah, I usually cut 3 inches wide, and the length is usually, because I usually use leftovers, it's whatever it is. The length should be a little more than the width of your zipper, which zippers tend to be about almost an inch wide, depending on your zipper, if you can see that. Not quite an inch, more like 7/8. But yeah. So what I do is iron this. I fold it in half, and I'll iron that, and then I take it and fold it towards its center. And this one probably needs to be re-ironed, but it'll be fine. I fold it towards the center, and I don't fold it completely into that center. I leave a little gap just to keep it from having too much bulk in there, and then fold it back in half, and then you got a nice little piece of binding tape. Double fold. That's called double fold binding tape. Okay. It doesn't have to be bias binding tape because you're not needing it to stretch any, okay? As a matter of fact, that may cause you more trouble than if you just buy non-bias binding tape. And bias means it's cut diagonally on the fabric, which makes it stretch more. So now we have this. So I know that I want to put this. So let's just test this out. If I put this right over the end, just like that. Come on. Okay. We should be, it looks like my edge is still lining up right there, so I shouldn't need to cut anything off the end, because you can cut these ends off, and I have done that before. It just depends on where this is going to land, right? So the first thing I'm going to do, I am going to actually cut off this jagged edge here, because it just takes you a little bit away from the seam. And now sometimes, depending on how much I need, I will cut off half of this space here, but I don't need that much on this bag, so I'm just going to cut off the ends just like that, just to get rid of the little pinked edge. It's not really necessary. This doesn't fray too much. I'm going to do the same thing on the other end. Okay. And so I don't have to pin this anymore because I find it easier to hold personally. But if you want to make sure that stays in place, right, like that. And see, this may be too close to, if I push it right up on the edge, it's going to be too close to that metal thing here, right? You don't want to sew over that with your needle because it will break your needle. You can sew over the teeth as long as it's a nylon zipper. You cannot sew over metal or metal teeth. You're going to damage something. So I'm just going to push this back just a little bit so that that edge is even with this. Now, when I cut off half of this, I will cover up that whole end and just sew and encase that in it. In this case, I don't really need to do that. I just need to cover up those ends. So I'm just going to butt that right up against there like that. Give me a little overhang, right? And see, me personally, I would take this to the machine and sew it like that. But if you really want something to hold it, I suggest these. Now these are the, I'll grab one of the regular ones. These are the Wonder Clips you've probably seen. Now you've probably seen this one, this red one, which has a wider front. Now these right here are smaller ones, and they have a very narrow front compared to the other one. You can see how much narrower it is, and they just hold smaller spaces. And these work really well for a zipper because you will hold just that one little spot instead of just like that, instead of taking up that whole area. And I just like to use these when I'm working with zippers more so than a pin or the bigger clips. So you can do just like that, so it holds in place if you want to before you go to your sewing machine. Now I don't use them anymore because I've been doing it for a while and I just don't really need to. I can hold on to it while I put it in there. So the other thing you're going to need when I do this, I don't actually use a zipper foot. I use, where are my feet at? I use this edge foot right here. It has a little plate right down the center here. And you can kind of see, let's see if I can get this to focus on that better. Yeah. There's a little bend in the plate in the center. If you move the needle over here, that's so the needle can fit in there. If you put it in the center, then you can stitch in the ditch, so to speak, like you're stitching in the seam on a quilt or something. But if you move the needle over here to this slot, then it gives you, and you use this as a guide, it gives you about 1/8 of an inch from the edge of whatever you're sewing on. So I use this foot when I do top stitching on the edge of this, as well as when I do the top stitching when I finish off my zipper. So you don't have to have one of these. You can use your regular foot. This is what my regular foot looks like. And you can, if you put your needle in the center, which would line up with that line right there, you can just use the next line over as a guide for the edge, right? I like this foot because it has this plate that sets down flush with the bottom of my machine, and it helps me keep things in line and even. Okay, so I'm going to snap this on, and I'm going to move to my machine and show you how I stitch this on. Okay, I'm over at my machine. I'm ready to stitch down this end tab. I have it butted closely to the end, this metal end here. I make sure that the tails of my upper and lower thread are, the upper thread should be between the parts of the foot, and then the lower thread is underneath, and then you make sure they're pulled back behind it. This helps prevent your thread from tangling in the beginning. I'm using a universal 9014 needle because I'm sewing through different materials with the zipper material and the tab material, and I feel like that works best for this part of my sewing. So I'm going to put this up under here and align it with that edge I got going on right there. Hold on, my thing's moving around. There we go. I have put the end of this fabric past on the other side of where the needle comes down. You don't want to put the very edge of your fabric right where your needle comes down, because it's going to suck it down into that throat plate, and you're going to have a big old mess. So don't do that. I've set my stitch length to 3.5, which is what I prefer for top stitching. So I'm going to just get my needle lowered so I can begin and make sure everything looks okay, and then I'm going to take a couple of stitches, and then I'm going to reverse the same couple of stitches, okay? And then I'm going to continue forward. That just locks in the end of your stitch, And the thing about using this particular foot for this is that this metal, if I'm on the edge of this metal thing, it wants to get hung up, so I have to pick up my presser foot and lower it back down so I can move forward, just to keep it from bunching up. And then when I get over that, I usually have to do that again, which is why I said you may not want to use this kind of presser foot. I just find I can get closer to the edge with this presser foot. And then sometimes if I'm having trouble, I'll grab these back threads and I just pull on it a little bit as I'm sewing. I'm not pulling like I'm going to pull the threads out. I'm just pulling to help guide that through. So here we go. Once I get to the end, I'm going to do a couple of back spaces again. Although I think that come off my zipper. Now I've gone all the way over to the, there we go. Up. I should have backspaced sooner. I was way off the zipper, but it'll be fine. So there's my top stitching on here, and I got close to that edge and I've caught the end of my zipper tape. Everything looks great. So I'm gonna go ahead and just cut this off even with the edge of my zipper, because I'm gonna use this other part for the other end of my zipper once I get my threads out. That's why I should have backspaced sooner. Let's take my little seam ripper, get that out. There we go. All right. So now I have my zipper tape, and you want to trim that edge. I want it to be as even as possible with the edge of your zipper. It's not focusing on that. There we go. And so now we have that end done. So I need to do the other end, which is a little bit different because you got this thing going on, right? I'm going to unzip this. Not all the way, just probably not even that much. A little bit less. I want to make sure this is out of here. And the other thing to watch for on this end, I'm trying to get this where to focus. These little metal, these are metal. These little silver things on the end are metal. You don't want to hit those with your needle. Okay? Same thing as that little metal piece on the end. Everything else is nylon. The zipper itself is metal. These little things are metal, and the stop at the end is metal. So you don't want to hit those with your needle. It could potentially break your needle, and you can have, that's not good. Okay? So with this one, you may certainly want to use the little clippers. As you can see, now say this is the problem I'm going to have here. If I put that there, where I stitch is going to be right on top of those metal pieces, and I don't want that. Okay, so let's get this set up correctly. I want it to be just in front of those teeth because of where my tab needs to be. Okay, I put it just in front of those teeth, not teeth, the little metal ends, just like I did on the other end. Okay, now with this one, a lot of people are going to want to keep those clips on because it's coming apart, and that if you got to do that, you do that. That's no problem. Like I said, I just find they get in my way, but I do, when I first started doing it, I did use those because it held it together. You know, as you do things, you do different things differently. Okay, I got to get this to focus back down here. Here we go. All right, so we're gonna do the same thing we did on the other one. I'm gonna put that down, lower my needle, well, take a few stitches, do a back stitch. Here we go. And I'm gonna adjust as I go across here. And this time when I actually get to the end, I'm going to back stitch instead of too far out on the other part. So there we go. There is our top stitched zipper tab in. Okay. I'm going to trim off all my threads. And I'm going to take you over back to the bag. Okay, I'm back to my bag. I'm going to double check everything. The perfect scenario is that the edge of these tabs line up with the marks you made. Okay, so I mark it 1/2 inch because I have 3/8, so it gives me just a little bit of room there. Sometimes I catch the end of these tabs in my seam, and that's okay. Most people like to keep the tabs out of the seam, but that will leave a little bit of a gap there, but it's usually not noticeable. So the other thing I'm going to do, where is it? I'm going to put this bobby pin on the end of my zipper. The reason I do this is because when I'm sewing the zipper on, I'm going to have to move this out of the way because that sticks out past the edge of the zipper where you want to stitch at, and it'll just move your whole foot over. So I always put a bobby pin on there. I need to get some shorter ones because these can be too long for smaller bags sometimes, but this works perfectly for being able to grab that zipper when you're filling up under things. So I also need, I'm just going to go ahead and unzip this for the, it makes it easier for me to lay this down. And I'm going to put this right here, and you want to line up the edge of your zipper tape with the top edge of your bag. Okay, now if you're new to this is what I'm going to suggest. I'm going to suggest either you clip this with the clips along the edge to keep it stable, and then take it to your sewing machine and baste it. I am not new to this, so I will be putting my lining fabric, I'll be making a sandwich. Okay, I'm gonna make a sandwich because, and I'm not gonna use clips. I may put one to hold this until I get to the machine, but as I said, I've been doing this for a while and I find it easier to get everything aligned without having to take the clips out. It's faster for me. But if you're doing this, if you're new to it, you can do that. You can also use I thought I had that right here. Okay, you can also use this to help hold that in place. I have used it before, and you would just run it along the edge of this, and then it helps hold it in place. It will not gum up your needle. It's not going to change the effect of anything. It just is a little stickum to hold it in place, and I use it all the time for things like that. I use it to, when I have sewn in labels, I use it to on the back of the labels, and I stick it on there to hold it in place until I stitch around it. So this is a useful tool to have as a sewist. You use the little tiny clips or the glue is my suggestion for holding the zipper in, because pins, when you do a pin, I'm just going to show you. If I put a pin in here, you don't want to put it this way because it's going to be in the way of when you're sewing. You would want to put it this way, and when you do that, especially since I've got a quilted piece, see how it bumps up right there? I don't like that because everything's not laying as flat as possible, and sometimes it can cause you to it just can cause things to be sewn incorrectly, and that's why I don't like using pins when I'm dealing with a zipper, because of that bump right there. I'm not saying that it's wrong or that you can't use it. You certainly can. I'm sure there's plenty of people that use it all the time. I have no problem with it. That's just not what I prefer to do. So I'm going to put that pin back up. I would either use these little clips, and I suggest the Wonder clips for this portion will work just fine. Okay, because you got a wider surface you're clipping on. Either one will work, or the glue. That's what I suggest, to hold that in place. And as I said, I also suggest you hold it like that, and then you go the way I'm gonna show you how to sew. I suggest you sew this down before you add the top if you're first doing this, okay? You would do exactly what I'm gonna show you I do with the sandwich, except you leave the top layer off and just sew with a basting stitch. And a basting stitch is just a longer stitch on your machine, so you can remove it if you need to, okay? If it's showing after you do your final stitch, okay? So I've got my end lined up where I want it. Got that there. And you want to make sure, if you're doing the sandwich, you have right sides facing together. And you also want to make sure your zipper is facing your front fabric, okay? Very important, or else your zipper will be the wrong direction. If you turn it the other way, facing your lining fabric, then your zipper pull is going to be on the inside of your bag, which is not good. So, I'm going to line all this up right over here. I'm going to get that just started. And I'm going to put one clip there, just to hold that together until I get to my machine. Alright, so now we're going back to the machine. Okay, I'm back at my machine and I'm ready to put this zipper in. First thing I'm going to do is change my foot on my machine to a zipper foot. This is what the zipper foot looks like for my machine. You can see that it's missing some stuff on each side, and it has a little groove on each side, and that is for the needle. It has a bar you can clip to on this side as well as this side, and that is helpful if you're depending on what side of the zipper you're wanting to sew on, okay? Now, all machines do not have this type of zipper foot. Some of them look differently, but it is usually a narrower foot where you can, this portion has an inset, so it will go over the top of the zipper, and this will allow you to butt right up directly against the zipper teeth, so you can get as close to it when you're sewing as possible. So I'm going to clip that on here. Alright, turn around thing. Alright, and I'm going to make sure my threads are going through that groove, my top thread, just like that. Okay, so I'm going to bring my fabric over, my fabric sandwich. Okay, and you want to start stitching just before the end of this. You don't want to stitch together this portion because that's your seam going the opposite direction. So you want to start stitching just before the end of your zipper tab, okay? Got everything lined up. I know that if I put, alright, let's set that down. I'll take this clip off. And this is why I like to have this like that, so I can move this more easily. Make sure things are aligned. So, as you can see, the edge of this is the edge of my fabric, because that's the edge of my zipper as well, okay? If your fabric extends past the edge of the zipper, you want the edge of that foot to be on the edge of your zipper, okay? That's where it needs to be. All right, so because that's going to put this in the area that I want it to be when I do the stitches. All right, so we're going to layer that back together. I'm also going to hold on, sorry. I'm going to move my needle, let's see, there we go, to the, that was the wrong button. You can see my needle move, because I want it to the middle position so it goes down in that groove and it's not sewn on top of my zipper teeth, okay? And I'm going to, for this stitch, I keep it at 3.5, which is not a basting stitch, but it's still easier to pull out. But it's also if you're doing this for the first time, I would go all the way to the highest stitch depth. On my machine it's 5, but I'm not going to stitch back over this, so I do 3, but 3.5, because I'm stitching through lining fabric, zipper fabric, and then a quilted fabric. So I'm upping the stitch length because I'm going through all those layers. Okay, so I have lined mine up with the edge of that zipper tab, like I said before, and I'm going to take a few stitches. I'm going to slow down my machine so I don't go too fast for y'all. And then I'm going to back stitch. Okay. And then I'm just going to keep on going, making sure everything is aligned. And as I sew, you can kind of see the bump. That's the teeth up under the feet, up under the fabric. And this edge is aligned with that tooth, and it's keeping the needle right there, and this part is going over the teeth. So that's why you want to use that zipper foot. Okay. So I'm just going to check, make sure everything's in place. This is something, I'll move this just a little bit closer. That you, I do them faster. Usually I've slowed down my machine, so I'll have a lead foot. But if you're new to it, I would go slow anyway. Always go slow when you're trying something new. Don't go so fast. It's not a race, right? As you get better at something, you can go faster. All right, so now I'm to a point. I'm gonna go just a little bit further. I'm to a point where I need to move this out of the way, so I can sew down the rest of this. See how this is bumping up? It would do that even if I didn't have this on the end of the tab. It bumps up because of that zipper pull. So this is what I meant about, this is why I put this on the end, because now I can lift this up, turn this around. It's easier to grab a hold of that than it is to grab a hold of the little tiny zipper pull. So I'm going to pick up my presser foot. Don't pick up your needle. Leave your needle there. Now, I still have trouble getting past the edge of my foot sometimes. So most presser feet, you can push up on it some more, right? And this is a little bit tricky because I have to hold down the front of the fabric and push this up, and then I can pull the zipper on past, right? And sometimes it gets stuck, and it's a little bit, make sure you put your presser foot back down. Just move it around a little bit. Don't pull on it too much, and make sure it's not getting caught on your fabric. That's why I said when you're first doing this, you probably don't want to put this on top. You probably just want to put your zipper down and do a basting stitch so you can see everything more easily. Instead of putting that on, I just like to do it all in one go because it's faster for me. So now we're going to just finish sewing on the edge. And now that zipper pull is not in our way, and I'm gonna sew to the end of that, do some back stitching, and then I can take it off. Here we go. All right, I'll show you how it looks. Let me move the machine out of the way. Okay, I've taken it off the machine, and I am clipping the ends. I'm gonna fold this up so I can see the sandwich that has been made. There we go. Everything is nice and even. Okay. You'll notice that my top fabric is hanging out past my quilted fabric, and this is something that I struggle with personally. What's happening there is because this is quilted and this is not, sometimes it stretches one fabric more than another fabric, right? Because they are even, they are the same size. If we look back over here, I I have done multiple things to try to figure that one out. So if somebody out there knows how to figure that one out, you can let me know. But I have that problem all the time. And I'm sure it's got something to do with the feed and stuff. I don't worry about it too much because I know I can still sew my bag up even with that happening. Okay? But we're going to just look at the fact that there's our zipper sandwiched nice and neat between everything, right? So, what I will do after this, I take this, I'm going to sew the other side on, but then I'll show you about top stitching. But I will always iron this before I top stitch. Very important, okay? It keeps your edges nice and flat. So when you sew, you're making sure you don't, you see how this is doing here on the back? This does it. You want it to lay nice and flat when you top stitch. And the top stitch is not just for decoration. It also helps keep this piece laying flat so it doesn't come up into your zipper when you try to unzip it, okay? Very important to do that top stitch. Not just for decoration. It does give it a more professional finish, in my opinion, but it also has a purpose. It is to keep this from coming into your zipper, okay? So, I'm going to go ahead and sew the other side on, and then I will talk to y'all about stop top stitching, okay? Well, before I do that, maybe I should say, I'm going to do this in the same way that I did the other one, okay? I'm going to open that zipper up, except this time, when you sew the other side of the zipper, you got to make sure your two right sides are facing, right? So I like to turn this over. There we go. Which means I'm going to be sewing from this end first, so I'm going to zip that zipper back up. So, when you do this, align your edges. I'm aligning the edge of my two front pieces, so I can make sure I'm in the right place. You got it just like that, and just like we did on the first side, you just have this other portion in the way. And as I said before, I would baste this if you're new first, and then come back and do your final stitch when you lay this on top. So then you make a sandwich, just like I did before. And the important thing at this point is to make sure that you have your lining fabric facing your lining fabric and your front fabric facing your front fabric to make sure things are on the correct side. I have not been paying attention before and done that incorrectly, and then I had to take things out. So I'm going to go sew this, and then I'll be back to talk about top stitching. Okay, I have my bag ready for doing the top stitch. I did take it to my iron and press everything nice and flat. Look to the inside, everything's nice and flat. There's a string hanging out over there, but everything's nice and flat. Now, if you've used a bulkier lining, I have used an 80-20 batting for my quilting, because I like my bags to be softer. I don't like it to be stiff. But if you use something to make it stiffer, and you're finding that this does not want to iron over well, it's bulky, what I would do is open this up and go down along that edge and trim out that folded over bit right there. And you just have to be careful not to clip your fabric, and that will reduce the bulk you have when you fold this over. I don't find that it's a problem for me personally, because it is a little bit bulkier up there, but it's not so bulky that it prevents me from sewing or prevents me from getting things to lay nice and flat. So that is my suggestion for that, to just take some of that bulk out by trimming up the batting or interfacing or whatever you have in that seam, but not cut the fabric. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the machine and do a top stitch. Okay, I'm ready to do my top stitch. I've changed back to that edge foot. And I have added my bobby pin back to my zipper. Anytime I'm sewing around a zipper, I put a bobby pin on it because it's easier to grab a hold of than that little tab when you need to move the zipper out of the way. So I'm going to go ahead and unzip this all the way to the end. Oh, that thing is... All right. I'm going to start stitching right about in here because I'm going to go around this whole thing and come back to here. So I'm going to start stitching right about here. And be sure that you change your needle position back to the far left, okay? And not in the center like we had for the zipper foot. And make sure your thread is going through there correctly. Mine is getting stuck. It's a little awkward filming these, y'all. I'm just gonna be honest. So, with the camera in my way. But, alright, making sure my threads are back behind, which is very important to keep it from tangling. Okay. I'm gonna set that down. I've got that plate of that edge foot right in this little crease between the fabric and the zipper teeth. And when I first start, I like to hold my tails down. You can't see that in the camera, but I like to hold the tails down just with my finger. I'm not pulling on them. I'm just holding them down to keep them from sucking back up in there when you start stitching. So I'm just going to take a couple of stitches and I'm going to back stitch, okay? That's going to secure that end for me. I'm just going to continue on down the edge, and that plate helps me guide it. And because I've ironed the fabric, it's going to stay flat. Just make sure everything is still flat. You know, you're just kind of holding to guide it. You're not pushing or pulling. You're just guiding. All right. Once I get right here, I've got to move my zipper out of the way. So I'm going to pick up this, get this going back that way, and like I said, I have to push up. You have to hold it with your finger on my machine. Some may be different, so I can move that zipper on out of the way. Okay, I'm gonna put my pressure foot back down, and I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna sew all the way to my, you can't see that on there, but my needle is to the edge of that zipper tab. Okay, I don't think I can get it to, I can't get it back any further, but that's where I've stopped at. So I picked up my presser foot. I'm going to turn this until it's 90 degrees the other way. Put my presser foot back down. I'm going to stitch right across the end of that zipper tab until I get to where I need to be, until my needle gets into this portion where it needs to be. And then I'm going to pick up my presser foot. I'm going to turn it one more time. Okay? And I'm going to make sure that everything is aligning like it's supposed to be. Now that does take some practice to know where your needle needs to stop. And there's no, I have gone too far and just had to back stitch a stitch to get in the right place. There's nothing wrong with that, y'all. Nothing wrong with that. It's just a little extra stitch of love. That's what I call it. So, now I've got my plate back along the edge of the, in the little ditch here is what I call it. And we're going to keep on going. And when I stop, I want to stop. I don't want to get right up on the zipper, y'all. Stop a good little bit so you can still move this, right? I'm going to pick up my foot. And again, I have to hold it. This does take some finagling to do this, but with some practice, again, you can get it done. And now, while I've got that up, I'm going to go ahead and trim these ends of the thread I started with. Okay? That way they don't get tangled up when I come back around this corner. Alright? So, lower your presser foot. And keep going until we get to the end of the tab. Pick up my foot, make a turn, Make sure everything is laying right. Stitch right across there until I get to where I need to stitch. And then I'm going to turn again. Right? And I'm going to go right back over where I started. I'm going to go right over that until I get a little bit past it. And I'm going to do a couple of back stitches and then go forward again, right? And the reason you don't just back stitch and stop, you need to go back forward again. So you're going over that place 3 times. And it's hard, as in crochet, if you crochet or knit, when you weave in ends, you should go weave in this way, then that way, then that way, because if something's going in 3 different directions, it's hard for it to pull out. So that's why when you do a back stitch, you go forward again. You don't just back stitch, okay? So I'll pick up my needle, lift up my foot, and trim this up, and then I'll see y'all over on the side to show y'all how this looks. Right, here we are with our finished zipper. It's looking very nice. You can see here, this is what I was talking about, going over the ends of the zipper. It gives a nice top stitch finish to those ends because the plan is to not catch them in our seam here. Okay, so let's measure that seam right quick. Let's see how big it is. It's from the end. It's a little more than 1/2 inch actually. So you can see it's gonna leave me a little gap there, but that makes it easier to turn, right? We put that measurement in place in the beginning to make sure we got enough room for that seam and turning. So that should work out perfectly whenever I sew the sides of my bag. And now if we pull my zipper, we can see it opens really nicely. I've got that top stitch going on. It looks nice and neat. Get this to focus. That's why I do that slightly longer stitch, because I'm going through several layers and it just looks neater to have that longer stitch. And if we look on the inside, you can see I used a darker thread on the bottom. That is not a requirement because, and you can see I should have gotten that pushed back a little bit more, but it's not interfering with the zipper, so it is okay because it runs up underneath it. Okay, but the purpose of that top stitch is to keep that nice and flat and keep it from migrating into the zipper space, because you don't want that. Okay, so, and everything's nice and finished, so this bag is ready for me to sew, to finish sewing. Now I'm not gonna show that part, but basically you want to first make sure your zipper is open. Make sure your zipper is open, right? It's gonna be sad, I've done it many times, if you don't make sure your zipper is open. Okay, and then you would fold your bag out like this. Hold on. Right, you got insides facing each other, outsides facing each other, right? And then you just stitch your seam all the way around, leaving an opening here. You still have to leave an opening here. And then you can reach through. That's why you leave your zipper open. You can reach through and pull everything and turn it right side out, right? So after this, that's all that's left is me. I'll start here with my edges aligned, obviously. And I'll back stitch and I'll come around here, and then I don't cut the thread, I just pull it and turn it, and then I come down here. I like to back stitch at the corners where they cross to, just to give it a little more structure. And I come all the way across, and when I get, so something I will say, I will use my smallest stitch length, 2.5. Well, it's not my smallest. I'll use a regular 2.5 stitch length when I'm here. Once I get to here, I will change it to 3.5 because I'm stitching through all this thickness. Okay, if you make your stitch length too small, it's gonna be harder to get through the thicker portions. So change your stitch length, it'll make it easier. And then I'll just wind up stitching, do the same thing at the corners, all the way back around, stitching, leaving an opening. And then, like I said, put your hand in, pull it inside out, and there you go. Make sure you clip your corners too. Okay, So I'm not going over that because it's supposed to be just a zipper tutorial, but I just wanted to briefly tell you how I will finish the bag. So, and then we'll have a nice bag and it'll be in the shop soon. So I hope y'all enjoyed this little zipper tutorial and found some useful tips in it. If you have any questions, just let me know down in the comments. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Think about subscribing, and I will see y'all later. Bye.